What if talent wasn't enough? What if a band had the look, the sound, the spark, but not the luck?
We try not to pin that down, just to allow people to say what they think about it.
Some were too ahead of their time, and others were chewed up and spit out by the industry machine. And a few?
So people kind of gave us this time to use, and we wanted to make sure that since
Victims of bad timing, worse management, or just being in the wrong place when the spotlight passed them by. They had everything, except the fame they deserved. This is rock bands that should have been massive but failed. King's X is one of those bands that, musicians absolutely love, but the general public just never quite got. Formed in the early 80s in Missouri, this power trio, Doug Pinnick on bass and vocals, Ty Tabor on guitar, and Jerry Gaskell on drums, created a sound that was, completely their own.
It's real hard we don't know where we fit, we don't know anything, we just play it. So even for us to say where we stand.
They blended heavy, drop-tuned riffs with these incredible, Beatles-esque vocal harmonies and deeply spiritual, almost psychedelic lyrics. It was a mix of progressive metal, funk, and soul that was way ahead of its time. Albums like 1989's Gretchen Goes to Nebraska and 1990's Faith, Hope, Love became cult classics. They were critically acclaimed, and they influenced a whole generation of huge bands like Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Pantera. They even got a slot at Woodstock '94. But here's the thing. Despite all that respect, they never had a gold record. Their label support was inconsistent, and their unique sound was just too hard to categorize for mainstream radio. Were they metal? Were they alternative? Were they Christian rock? Nobody knew where to put them. So they remained this ultimate cult band, a massive influence that somehow never became a household name themselves. It's a classic case of being too good, too different for your own good. In the early 2000s, the Brooklyn indie scene was exploding, and right at the center of it was TV on the radio. This was a band that, on paper, had everything. They were critics' darlings, fusing indie rock, electronic, soul, and post-punk into this dense, artistic, and incredibly cool sound. Their albums, like 2006's Return to Cookie Mountain and 2008's Dear Science, were masterpieces. They landed on pretty much every end-of-year best-of list. They had this magnetic stage presence, led by the charismatic duo of Tunde Adebimpe and Kip Malone. They were headlining mid-sized venues and were a fixture on the festival circuit. But, they never made that final leap. They were always overshadowed by more commercially accessible indie acts from that era, like The Strokes or Interpol, who had simpler hooks and a more straightforward rock sound. TV on the radio's music was complex, layered, and it demanded your attention. It wasn't exactly background music. So, they found themselves in this strange middle ground, too popular for the underground, but not quite pop enough for the mainstream. They were beloved by critics and a dedicated fan base, but they never achieved that blockbuster sales or pop radio presence their talent deserved.
Thinks that I would do this, it's like some crass move to get attention. It's like jump on the bandwagon, some kids.
The Replacements, the ultimate beautiful disaster. This Minneapolis band, formed in 1979, was pure, raw, hard-on-sleeve rock and roll. Led by the brilliant but notoriously self-destructive songwriter Paul Westerberg, they evolved from a chaotic punk band into one of the most revered alternative rock acts of the 80s. Albums like Let It Be from 1984 and Tim from 1985 are considered stone-cold classics. They wrote these incredibly poignant, emotionally raw songs that influenced everyone from Nirvana to the Goo Goo Dolls. So, what went wrong? Well, pretty much everything. Their legend is built on drunken, erratic, and often transcendent live shows where they might play a brilliant set one night and completely fall apart the next. They had a self-sabotaging streak that clashed horribly with the expectations of their major label, Sire Records. They were infamous for getting banned from Saturday Night Live in 1986. for being drunk and swapping clothes on stage, bad behavior, internal dysfunction, and a string of commercial singles that just failed to connect with a wider audience meant they never became the arena-sized name their music warranted. They were always the underdogs, the lovable losers, a band that was just too beautifully flawed to ever truly sell out. For over 4 decades, Social Distortion has been a pillar of the Southern California punk scene. Formed in 1978 by frontman Mike Ness, their sound was a unique blend of first-wave punk, rockabilly, and outlaw country. It was tough, honest, and deeply American. Albums like 1983's Mommy's Little Monster and 1990's Social Distortion became seminal records in the punk world. But here's the thing about Social D. They were always more of a respected lifer act than a chart-topping crossover success. Mike Ness's well-documented battle with heroin addiction in the mid-'80s nearly destroyed the band before they even had a chance to break through, while they scored some modern rock radio hits in the 90s with songs like Ball and Chain and Story of My Life. They never quite achieved that multi-platinum mainstream rock radio dominance. In hindsight, they basically wrote the template for what would become punk meets Americana, but they never fully reaped the commercial rewards. They remained a fiercely independent and loyal cult band, a constant touring force, but they never quite reached that stadium-level status that their influence and longevity might suggest.
They won't give us copies.
They don't give us copies.
We might leak them.
Yeah, we've been looking online to see if it's been leaked, but so far not. We really need to hear it.
When Silversun Pickups emerged from the Silver Lake indie scene in Los Angeles in the mid-2000s, the comparisons were immediate and constant, Smashing Pumpkins. And it was fair. They had that same blend of fuzzed-out heavy guitar riffs and dreamy, shoegazy textures. Their 2006 debut album, Carnivas, was a huge critical success, spawning the massive modern rock hit Lazy Eye. They were frequently praised as one of the most memorable and underrated indie/alt-rock bands of their time. They got a Grammy nomination. They had moderate chart success with subsequent albums like Swoon and Neck of the Woods. But they never quite broke through to that next level. They never became a true festival headliner or an arena status act. Part of it was timing. They emerged in an era when the music industry was shifting away from rock and towards pop and EDM. Despite their critical acclaim and a solid fan base, they plateaued at that mid-level alt-rock success, never quite reaching the commercial heights of the bands they were so often compared to.
We've been through a hell of a lot as a band, making the first 2 records, touring them.
In the early 2000s, the UK music press was in a frenzy, constantly hunting for the next big thing in the post-Britpop era. And for a moment, it seemed like the music was it. This band from Leeds mixed Zeppelin-style dance rock riffs with psychedelia and these huge soaring choruses. Their 2002 self-titled debut album was met with massive hype. They had a devoted fan base, and their live shows were legendary for their energy, but it all just stalled. There were long delays between albums, industry pressure, and frontman Robert Harvey's personal struggles and health problems. By the time their second and third albums came out, the initial momentum was gone. The music landscape had shifted. In retrospect, they had a sound that was almost perfectly designed for arenas, and their timing seemed to align with the rise of bands like Oasis and Kasabian. But a combination of label issues, internal problems, and just plain bad luck meant they remained a cult favorite, one of the great what-ifs of the early 2000s UK indie scene.
Record an album quite soon, but we want to do it quite quickly and make it very live and make it a very exciting album.
In the 1980s, if you liked big anthemic stadium-sized rock, you liked U2. And if you liked U2, you probably also liked The Alarm. This Welsh band, led by Mike Peters, built a reputation for their high-energy live shows and huge chorus-driven songs like 68 Guns and Spirit of 76. They had the sound, they had the look, and they scored hits on MTV. They seemed perfectly engineered for stadiums, but they were always in the shadow of their more politically branded and commercially massive contemporaries, like U2 and Simple Minds. They were a solid second-tier name, a band that 80s rock fans remember fondly, but they were rarely mentioned in the same breath as the era's biggest names. They never quite made that final leap from successful rock band to global superstars. They were a great band, but they were always seen as following a trail that U2 had already blazed. London's The Godfathers were a tough, no-nonsense rock band that emerged in the mid-1980s. Their sound was a stripped-down mix of hard-edged pub rock, punk attitude, and classic rock and roll. They epitomized this with their cult anthem, Birth, School, Work, Death, a minor U.S. chart single that became their signature song. They gained a reputation for their tough, intense live shows and struck a chord with college radio audiences, particularly in the U.S., but that was as far as it went. They had this one, similarly styled follow-up single, but then the industry's attention shifted. Grunge and Britpop were on the horizon, and the Godfathers' brand of straightforward rock and roll suddenly seemed out of step. They remained a cult favorite, a reference point for a certain kind of gritty, honest rock, but they never became the widely recognized act that their powerful sound suggested they could be.
That was pretty big before I'd ever lived in Cleveland, called Lucky Pierre, but I'd never gotten signed. And like Cleveland has this vacuum of bands that can't ever escape from
Cleveland,
the city limit.
In the mid-90s, if you were an industrial or alt-rock band, getting signed to Trent Reznor's Nothing Records was like getting a golden ticket. That's what happened to Prick, the project of musician Kevin McMahon. Their 1995 self-titled debut album blended abrasive guitars, electronic textures, and dark hooks that fit perfectly alongside Nine Inch Nails and other alternative acts of the era. They had the association with Reznor, they had a major label platform, and they had a sound that was right in the pocket of what was popular. But despite that strong backing, the project received minimal radio or MTV support compared to more marketable peers. The band quickly slipped into obscurity, surfacing mainly in niche discussions about 90s industrial rock. It's a perfect example of how even the right connections and a sound that fits the times can't guarantee a breakthrough without that crucial promotional push. Australia's Lime Spiders were a high-energy garage psych band that formed in the late 1970s. They drew heavily from 60s fuzz guitar rock and punk, creating this raw, reverb-drenched sound that was both a throwback and a precursor to later alternative and garage rock revivals. They achieved cult status in Australia and pockets of the international underground. But they never got the sustained overseas promotion needed to capitalize on their crossover potential. As the 80s and early 90s shifted towards slick pop, hair metal, and then grunge, the Lime Spiders' uncompromising garage psych approach kept them beloved by a small, core fan base, but it prevented them from ever breaking through to the mainstream crowd. They were a band that was just a little too raw, a little too weird, and a little too out of time to become the massive success their energy and sound could have supported. They had the riffs, the vocals, the passion, everything it should take to conquer the world stage. But fame doesn't always follow talent, and sometimes the world just doesn't listen. Which of these bands do you think deserved more love? And are there any we missed that should have made the list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from real music fans like you. If you enjoyed this dive into rock's great, What Could Have Been Stories? Hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. More deep cuts are on the way. Thank you for watching.